What's up guys, how's everybody doing? Today we're going to talk about what was the best video card back when this was released in February of 2002. It's the GeForce 4 Ti 4600. We're also going to put this shiny new cooler in, and we're going to start our Aquamark graphics card chart with the GeForce 4 being the first one there. We're also going to check out how it runs games from its time period, so stay tuned. So this is what the Asus V8460 Ultra originally looked like, and that is not how the one I acquired looks, which is fine because I got it cheap and I love to fiddle with these wonderful retro PC parts. The plan is simple. 1. Remove the ugly remains of what once was a lackluster cooler. 2. Give the old card a nice cleanup. 3. Install a cooler that's up to the task of keeping this baby cool. 4. Play some games and see what it can do. Removing the old heatsink is very easy. It uses some plastic knobs to hold it in place, and you can remove them with finger pressure. Comparing this to today's coolers, it's a breeze to remove. That is because this chip uses a 150 nanometer process, and it didn't put out nowhere as much heat as today's chips. Compared to this, today's chips are more than 10 times more compact. A mid-range card produced nowadays uses a 12 nanometer process. You can fit 10 times more transistors in there, which means that it will get at least 10 times hotter. So naturally, you need a much bigger cooling solution. To clean this, we are going to remove the old thermal paste with an alcohol wipe as much as we can, and then we are going to use isopropyl alcohol and a toothbrush to scrub the dust deposited here over the years. It's always a good idea to use isopropyl alcohol because it evaporates really fast and prevents you from turning your electronics on only to find out a piece of it is still wet, shorted, and burned something important. I bought these coolers in bulk because with this hobby it's very common to get video cards with broken coolers. They are cheap and effective for older video cards. I've used an earlier model of this guy about 15 years ago on a Radeon X800 video card, which is 2 generations ahead, so it will be quite enough for the 4600 on the video. I'm glad these coolers are still around. Apparently, my X800 needs a good cleaning. I haven't used it for quite some time. One downfall with these coolers is that they come with the plugs for the motherboard fan header instead of the video card fan header. Not a deal breaker, but it would be nice to have the cooler connect to the graphics card. The original heatsink is actually fairly bulky and heavy. That is good because it makes the GPU work hard to warm it up. Makes it a bit safe as long as it's attached, the chip won't burn itself. But it also takes a lot to dissipate the heat. This is the reason why the pans you use for cooking have a thick underside, so it doesn't cool off immediately when you throw some cold food from the fridge in there. So a good idea is to have thick metal on the part that is in contact with the chip, but have thin layers of metal so that air can go through them and dissipate the heat trapped on the bulky part. The 4600 only has 2 holes to support the cooler, and after a quick fitting test we can see that we need to use the holes on the extremity of the universal cooler. Button the cooler is very simple. You need to fasten these screws that have a few functions. 1 to hold the heatsink in place, 2 to serve as the screw hole for the ones that will come on the other side of the board, and 3 they act as a spacer so you don't crush the GPU. I love that they have included this cute miniature wrench for the job. The tiny pleasure of surprise included parts. For the all scientific thermal compound application, I don't really have a method for this. I have done it in 1,000 different ways, sometimes with what they say is too little paste and sometimes with too much, always with similar results. The washers are there so you don't ruin the PCB with the springs when you twist the screws in tight. It actually surprised me that these cheapy coolers came with spring-loaded screws, so it makes it safer to tighten them down on the chip without breaking anything. Now that we're all done, let's plug this baby to the MSI motherboard with a 3 GHz Pentium 4 and 1 GB of memory. This test bench setup should be quite enough to provide the 4600 with a bottleneck-free system. The OS we're running for these tests is Windows XP. The games we are going to test are GTA 3 from 2001, Battlefield 1942, and Mafia from 2002, and Halo from 2003. The GeForce 4 Ti 4600 was released in February 2002, so this will give a good idea of how it fared in games back then. At the end, we're going to do a quick run of Aquamark3 and register the score for future reference. Grand Theft Auto 3 was released in 2001. It's the oldest game we are testing today, but it displays a good share of graphical intensity. This is the first game of the series that came out in a third-person gameplay style, being the first two top-down view games. For the time, this game was very impressive, with a compelling storyline and the possibility to explore Liberty City freely, which was based on New York City. Something interesting is that apparently they weren't sure of how the public would receive the third-person view gameplay, and they left in a way you can still play the game using the top-down view when you zoom the camera all the way out. Interesting. Battlefield 1942 is the first of the acclamated Battlefield games. In this multiplayer combat game, each team has up to 32 players for a total of 64 people playing on the same server. Players can pick between the classes Scout, Assault, Anti-Tank, Medic, or Engineer to battle it all out on a World War II scenario. You're also able to use planes, tanks, marine vehicles, jeeps, and stationary weaponry on the battlefield. Of course, this game was a huge success and Electronic Arts still makes these games, and the massive game following is always excited to get the new iteration of it. And I am one of those nerds. Mafia, I would say, is one of the first GTA clones to be released, and it achieved huge success for its credible 1930s gangster-driven storyline. The story takes place in a fictional city from the 1930s with detailed period-correct architecture and skyline, outfits and cars, and even the music that plays throughout the game, making the atmosphere very enticing, and it brings its own set of challenges for the graphics processor. I love this game. There's a remake announced to come out shortly, and I can't wait to play it. Halo is a game ported from the original Xbox and released on PC at the end of 2003. This game was a console seller. At its release in 2001, many people bought Microsoft's original Xbox exclusively to play Halo. Already on the first Xbox, you could play the game in multiplayer mode online. At its time, it was a game changer, showing that there could be competitive multiplayer FPS games on consoles. For every console Microsoft released after the original Xbox, there is an updated release of the first Halo Combat Evolved. This game is great. It's a graphical challenge for PCs of the time, and I have been installing it to test computers I have assembled for decades now. Of course, the GeForce 4 Ti 4600 can play titles from the next couple of years, but this was a time of very fast advancements in processing power, so the later games will need to take a big hit on graphical details if you want to play them with a decent number of frames per second. We'll finish the first video card series video with our favorite benchmark from the 2000s, Aquamark3. This benchmark was created with the engine of the game Aquamark 2, and at the end it gives out a score based on CPU and GPU performance. We are going to start our chart with the 4600, but hopefully in the future we're going to have a comprehensive general idea of the performance of video cards from the old days. Throughout the videos we could see that the CPU was at around a 50% load in games, so it shouldn't be a bottleneck here. The 4600 got 2,214 points, and being a high performance card, its score should be a good benchmark for the cards to come on the next videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.